Hello again, and welcome to Football Manager Roleplay, a project where we create a player using the FM pregame editor, give him a potential ability of 200, and see if he will become the greatest American footballer ever. We will simply watch the progression of this player, Henry Marshall, from the age of 15 to hopefully his eventual retirement. This is a world-building exercise where Football Manager provides the events, and we build a story around those events. Let's take a look at Henry Marshall's current slide. As we can see, he's gained another +1 in current rating up to 136, and he's played his second Premier League season game. Marshall waits, rather impatiently, to break through the senior club at Liverpool instead of playing in the youth level. Liverpool sits in 9th place in the Premier League, and new manager Zinedine Zidane is under a lot of stress. However, world events might take the focus away from this episode. Let's move forward. We are now up to November 7th in gameplay, and let's go back a few days to the 2nd of November. On the 2nd, the Athletic website claimed that Zidane would be fired as manager of Liverpool if he didn't get a good result against Porto in the Champions League. The odds on Zidane in the betting pools moved closer to even money that he would be sacked, whether it be now or soon. But that same day, Liverpool's under-21 squad traveled to Brighton. Liverpool was number 4 in the Premier League under-21 Division 1. Liverpool was in 4th, Brighton was in 10th, but they went to Brighton and lost 1-0 in a sloppy game from both sides. You know, Marshall was good at passing and creating possession, but he really didn't create anything for his team. And he took an awful shot from the 6-yard line while he was basically crammed into a phone booth full of players. He looked a little bit silly doing it. He entered the game with a 6-7 match rating, relatively high for the team, which he went over here at Brighton. Many players, including Sahil Bashir, the only player to actually score in this game. He was clearly the best player on the squad that day. Here is Marshall, his result. Good passing, and certainly a lot of interceptions made, but all in all, a rather disappointing 6-7 result for him. Now, we'll go back here. The very next day in Portugal. Let's see if we can go and get back to our short list here. It's hard to find these things here. Gotta go to news and social, goes out and find, yes. Liverpool and Porto clash in the European match on the 3rd. That turns out in Liverpool's favor, 2-1, as Liverpool won that game actually quite handily. And the bookie numbers for Zidane being fired now go back away from even money. So just, depending on when you bet, you get a good bet for him leaving or a bad bet for him leaving. A couple of days later, there was another under-21 game scheduled for Liverpool. And this one was against a club called Furmado, and this is an international cup game. And Furmado is basically an under-19 Portuguese club. And let's see if we can find it here. Yep, there it is. There is Furmado, and they won that game 3-0. We'll see if we can actually pull it up. We should be able to. There it is. Maloney, Thiago on the penalty shot, Kyler Morton. They were already 3 up first half. They just ran right over the squad. Furmado had no business being in this one here. Henry Marshall, he ends the game with a 7-6 match rating. This game is basically played with Furmado sticking defense, and the Liverpool under-21 squad played with this game like a cat plays the ball astray. On November the 6th, BBC Radio 5 reported that Zidane would lose his job when the next game came against Arsenal. Let's see if we can pull that one. Yep, Arsenal clash could be Zidane's last, finally losing patience. according to BBC Radio 5. Radio 5 claimed that the team has had it with the club has had it with Zidane. They're just looking for a good excuse to lower the ats on him. And having with Liverpool having to travel to Arsenal, and Arsenal being the number one team of the Premier League, this was as good a chance as any. Well, Henry Marshall didn't get selected for that away game against Arsenal. That game ended as a 3-1 loss for Liverpool. After the game, Henry shared some texting with his teammates on the under-21 squad. He said, well, it's been 2 hours after the game. Nobody was fired. Henry said, maybe the owner forgot the axe. After that, Henry Marshall decided he'd take a nap. That night on November 7th, Henry was snoozing on the couch. It was past midnight when his phone kept ringing. He picked it up. It was Kenny Pierman calling him, one of his teammates at the youth academy. Henry, wake up, he said. Turn on the TV. There's been a terrorist attack at a Notre Dame football game. Something happened, but you have to see this. He flipped on the Sky News commentary, which stated that during the Notre Dame-Michigan State game, that Saturday in South Bend, Indiana, many fans began leaving the game due to sickness. By halftime, several fans were complaining of sickness and headaches, and by the beginning of the fourth quarter, hundreds of fans had broken out in hives, and some were having nosebleeds, or even bleeding from the ears. Many fans were slumped over in their seats unresponsive, and when fans began dying near the end of the third quarter, a mass panic began, and the stadium had to be emptied as a matter of public safety. Within minutes, nearly every available ambulance headed to the evacuated Notre Dame stadium. As the police tried to keep order, the stadium emptied out. Dozens of older people who had attended the game were already dead in their seats. It had been 20 years since the Al-Qaeda terrorist attack, and the emergency response protocols that were put in place after that attack were barely remembered now. The hundreds of sick began to flood in the hospitals as medical personnel from Chicago, Grand Rapids, and Fort Wayne began to converge on the area. The internet was flooded with speculation, and social media exploded, while the networks began immediate 24-hour coverage. FEMA and Homeland Security were immediately dispatched to gain federal control of the situation, and the FBI took over at South Bend. Emergency Operations Center was convened, and the president immediately called a meeting of the National Security Council before going on the air to reassure the country. Joe Biden stated that the goal of any terrorist attack was to create panic. He said that, quote, if this is such an attack, then the attackers have forgotten the incredible resilience of this country. If this is a provocation, we will choose a time and location to respond to it. I ask all citizens to not fall victim to speculation, to never fall victim to the sowers of discord, for if we do, we double the victory of the attacker. It is easy to remain calm during times of quiet, but to paraphrase Kipling, the hero keeps their head while all about them are losing theirs. By the end of the night, the number of victims had reached 100 dead, thousands more violently ill. The governor of Indiana declared a state of emergency, and the airports and airplanes were closed, quarantining the state from major traffic. As for heroes keeping their head, there were certainly no heroes on social media. Unconfirmed rumors of the attackers released an Ebola-like virus caused people to bleed to death within hours or have strokes or even going insane. Rumors of a Chinese attack on America or Ukrainian biolabs, or that the attack was a quote-unquote false flag for Biden to seize control of the government spread faster than whatever happened at Notre Dame. The National Security Council recommended to Biden that he, at least for 48 hours, could restore tranquility by shutting down the internet. It was certainly something that he had the power to do. This would close social media for 48 hours, but after that, Congress would be required to extend the shutdowns. Biden decided against the shutdown. The best way to calm the American people is to show that we have a situation in hand to devote whatever resources we need. Shutting down the internet plays in the hands of these lunatics. Bush didn't shut down the internet after 9/11, and I'm not going to be the first. But for now, all Americans could do was suffer while the rest of the world observed. Condolences were offered from nations across the planet, and with the government unable to identify the attackers, Bloody November would leave the world in shock. So, how did this affect Henry Marshall? After touching base with his family and friends, there was nothing for him to do but watch the news. Games scheduled the following Sunday in the US were canceled, and the US released the news that biological agents had been brought into the stadium and they had escaped the cursory gate checks. Therefore, until security could be increased for large public events like sports, professional sports had two choices: cancel the games or play the games in empty stadiums until they created a protocol. For Henry's under 21 games, this wouldn't be a problem. No one attended those games anyway, really, just a few hundred people. For Liverpool and the Premier League, perhaps a larger problem. Hello again. We are now up to the 21st of November 2026. Here is what has happened. For English football, the terrorist attack in November that took place in the United States had coincided with the beginning of the international break. This gave the Premier Division and the Championship some brief breathing room to decide how to go forward. The FA decided that there would be what they call a quote, initial vetting, end quote, of spectators. For the time being, there would be no visiting supporters allowed at games until the proposed quote unquote full vetting of spectators. Only members of official supporters clubs for a given number of years, or club benefits package holders, or season ticket holders who had been supporters of the club for years and who were well known to the clubs, those people who had, quote, established a pedigree of support, end quote, would be allowed to attend football matches. Same-day spectators would not be permitted to attend unless they were club members, with an exception made for very well-known persons, which the English press decried as celebs get luxe treatment while rooters must wait. But no one could purchase a ticket unless there was a strong link established between the ticket and the person who purchased it. And the days of just showing up with a punted ticket would almost be a thing of the past. Henry Marshall had been informed by the U.S. national team that he would take part in the Nations League game against El Salvador on the 15th, which would take place in an empty stadium for security reasons. But football had to go on, come what may. Henry's next game was November the 10th, and the Liverpool Academy clubs were given a crash course in recognizing the symptoms of VHM, viral hemorrhagic meningitis, and the most basic of biological protocols. They would play Doncaster Rovers in front of a very limited crowd on the road. That same day of the game, Goal 50 released its best 50 players list, with PSG's Kylian Mbappe at number 1. And we'll see, take a look at this list right here. There we go. Yep, there he is, Kylian Mbappe. We'll find him. We will find him. Kylian Mbappe here at number 1. Declan Rice at number 7. We have, after Rice, we have Mohamed Salah. He's here at number 17. We have Jurrien Timber at 22. And Alisson, the 29th best player. And in the 31st, we have Virgil van Dijk, right there. And finally, Trent Alexander-Arnold in the 34th spot. And we are back. Now, I had to stop the game once again because I was having a problem with skins. I had a nice little write-up set up, and then the game froze up, and it just ruined everything that I had recorded. I suspect that the Musterman skin, with all of its graphical detail and flair, is causing the game to seize up, or at least my, video or graphics driver to seize up on my laptop. So I changed to another skin. This is the WTCS Gold Skin version 1.2. And as you'll see, this looks much more like the standard type of Football Manager skin. So what are my plans if the game seizes up with this new skin? Well, the next level, if it seizes up again, I'll move back to the standard skin that comes with Football Manager. And if the game starts seizing up after that, then I'm just screwed. On November 10th, the next game was at Doncaster Rovers, and this was a Papa John's Trophy game. And as you can see here, it looks very different from the Musterman skin. Anyway, the result is a 2-0 victory from Liverpool under-21s, who had a very limited game atmosphere here. Doncaster gave it their best shot, but they couldn't generate any offensive power. Henry Marshall, he had a 6.9 rating in the game here. And as it happened, there you go. We can also look at player statistics here and see more detail about Walker's performance right there. 91% passing accuracy, not a lot of aggression. Next game that Henry had planned was that he was going to be sent off to El Salvador on the 11th. And this was a very emotional meeting for the U.S. men's national team in San Salvador. They knew they were playing during a critical time in American history. And USA team manager Brian Schmetzer emphasized the victory less than he emphasized that they should all come together as Americans and support each other. There were some players on the team that had connections to Indiana, or they had connections to Notre Dame, or they had connections to Catholic universities, and the players talked about the emotional importance, if not the necessity, of winning, not just as a team, but as a team of Americans. So let's see if we can go to the USA screen. Five Nations won, USA. How did that game turn out? And as we can see here, in Nations League Division Group A, this was a 3-0 win for the United States. Very comfortable win. USA dominated that game from start to finish. Henry Marshall finishes with a 7.1 rating, and he gets his 11th cap as a U.S. player. Had a 96% accuracy in passing. Very, very good. And the USA will qualify, actually, from Group 1. You can see over at here it is, Group 1, the final results, and they will move on to the semifinals of the Nations League game. So many competitions. Let's kind of go back to our social feed and look at some other news here. We will have that Yunus Musa from Arsenal, he wins the USA Player of the Year. Christian Pulisic of Juventus, he is the runner-up for the award. Johnny, playing off in Brazil, he is in the top 3 there. We also have Marcus Edwards. He looks for an acrimonious departure from Anfield following reports of the falling out with Zidane. And, the locker room is split. Team captain Declan Rice is on Zidane's side. It just reminds Henry Marshall of how Wilfried Nancy was just slowly being eaten. He was slowly eaten alive by disputes at Atlanta United while Marshall was playing there. So the very next day after this USA game, emotional USA game, he arrives at Liverpool and he is asked if he could play for the under-21s at Fulham just after he gets off the plane. I mean, this is the very day after he's just played in El Salvador, flying from El Salvador, and he has barely had any sleep. Henry said, I suppose I could. And he got on the bus and took the bus to Fulham. I mean, his teammates were even shocked that he was even on the bus, and they had to wake him up when he arrived. I mean, well, he managed to get his boots on and kit at least. Let's see how that game turned out. And as we can see, Fulham beats Liverpool 2-1 on 2 goals by Christian Shekurarak. But this doesn't stop Henry Marshall from actually having a good game. He had a 7.0 passing rating. There just really weren't a whole lot of attempts to actually pass here. And let's see if there's the player statistics. There is Marco. He will be over here. There we go. Had 6 tackles though. Had 3 interceptions. You know, he did fairly well for himself here. Analytical data, just going around as it happened here. Yeah, this is where he went. The match stats. Really not a whole lot of people taking their time here. You know, well, once again, Henry did pretty good despite the lack of rest that he had. Alex Ditchfield, if we can find Ditchfield, he's there. He had a 7.4 rating. He was the only other guy who had a good rating for Liverpool. After that game, Alex Ditchfield drove Henry Marshall back home. He said, because I don't trust that you won't fall asleep out on the road somewhere, and picked him up by car next day. And for the next few days at camp, he was given the name Iron Man Marshall. And I think we really need to stop here, really at November the 16th, as we are just over on time. We had a mass casualty terrorist attack take place in the United States with ramifications for football, not just in the US, but in the rest of the world. Henry Marshall gets another cap for the United States in an emotional game there. And he ends up playing a lot of other games besides, including 2 games back-to-back, which I suspect is just a fault of Football Manager for even allowing such a thing to happen. You know, maybe they sort of, what do you call it, you know, sort of kind of fudge things when it comes to players that aren't playing, you know, on the under 21 or youth level. We didn't even get to Henry's 20th birthday, which is going to take place 5 game days from now, but we will stop. And just remember, if you like what you've heard or what you've seen, please click the like and or subscribe button. Thank you. Until next time.